Ordinance and Buncombe County Ordinance. We are authorized to hear requests for certificates of appropriateness for alterations, demolitions, new construction, and other work within historic districts, or for the alteration and demolition of historic landmarks, and other duties, including preliminary review of subdivisions as specified by the ordinance for the HRC. I'm going to now ask our commission members and staff to introduce themselves and say a quick moment about what's brought them to serve on the HRC board. We'll start with
I'm Annie McDonald. I'm a professional architectural historian with experience in local planning and at the State Historic Preservation Office, and I am now in Cultural Resources Management Consulting.
I'm Leslie Carey. I have a master's degree in historic preservation and have worked with national and local nonprofit preservation groups.
Hi, I'm Sue Oliva. I have a doctorate in American history and experience working with historic preservation.
Emily Kite. I'm a local architect.
Maria De Sassi. I'm an architect, and I have experience working with large public sector historic preservation projects.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Gross. I have a master's degree in archaeology, but my day job is in animal welfare.
Well, I can't top that. My name is Chris German. I'm a local architect. I've been in Asheville since 1996. I've had a long appreciation for historic architecture, and Asheville has its share. And I was glad to be part of this board and help with the effort.
I'm Alexander Ellenbogen. I'm an architect.
Janice Ashley, legal advisor to the HRC.
Mayor too, a planning technician with the city of Asheville.
I'm Alex Cole. I'm the liaison to the HRC.
Before we get started, I'd like to welcome Maggie Ullman to our meeting. She is our newest city council member, and she is liaison to the HRC board. So welcome. I know you've been for a couple of meetings now, and we've been a little busy, so we have not properly welcomed you, so we appreciate the opportunity for you to come to our meeting.
No worries, I'll just say a quick hey too. Hey from Ruby, who officially doesn't care what this is about. But I asked, she's like, do you want to know? I was like, no, whatever. Yeah, I've been glad to come a couple times. The timing often works where it's not a problem, but I won't be here every time, but I'll be here as much as I can because I think the listening and the detail that gets into here is really good context to understand why we do what we do, how we do it, that type of thing. Really grateful for the level of expertise that you all bring to this. I know that you're all volunteers, and it is really thorough, detailed work with a lot of really thoughtful discernment, so I appreciate that. And I guess I can leave my cards here if anyone needs to get in touch with me. I mean, my email's on the city website, but I also have my cell phone on my card, so I'm really available via text or to meet at any time. If there's stuff that you want to talk about related to the commission, let's do it. If there's stuff you want to talk about related to other stuff that relates to the city, let's do it. You know, I'm a servant leader, so here to support y'all. Thanks.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming. Okay. We are going to start off by considering the minutes from our February meeting of the HRC. The meeting minutes include findings of fact and conclusions of law. Are there any corrections? Is there a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve the minutes from February 2023.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Okay. We're going to now begin the evidentiary hearings for the items listed on our agenda. As a quasi-judicial proceeding, the HRC is not setting policy, nor are we soliciting public opinion on the desirability of an application. The HRC hears and considers evidence presented and applies the standards set forth in the guidelines and standards of the specific historic district for that application. The HRC must make its decision upon competent, material, and substantial evidence to the relevant guidelines, to the facts. The commissioners, in voting for an item, will not have a fixed opinion that's not susceptible to change, will not have a conflict of interest, and will not have engaged in ex parte communication regarding the application. Following is the rules for speaking. This meeting is open to the public, but participation is limited to interested parties who wish to provide comment and testimony regarding the proposal. If you will be speaking as a witness, please focus on the facts and how they relate to the relevant historic district standards and guidelines, not personal preference or opinion. Witnesses must swear or affirm their testimony at this time. I will administer the oath for all individuals who intend to provide witness testimony today. So applicants and other folks that plan to speak on behalf of a particular application can all come forward, please. You can raise your right hands. Good. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the information you present during the hearing for a certificate of appropriateness or preliminary subdivision approval before the Historic Resources Commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Do you?
I do.
Thank you. Okay, we will now move to our first public hearing item. I think first on our agenda is entertaining a motion to continue, and somehow I've lost my agendas. There we go. To continue our application of Biltmore Village at Brook Street and Hendersonville Road rights of way. Is there a motion to continue?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we'll continue that application to the April meeting. And we'll move to the next item on our agenda, which is also old business in Montford at 109 Kingsland Alley. We'll start with our staff report.
Thank you, Chair Kite and members of the commission. I'm going to give a little bit of a brief recap. I think everyone was here at the last meeting, so I'll just make this super short and sweet. So this is a newly created lot that was carved out of 30 Watauga Street. You can see the parcel map on the top left. The subject property is highlighted in red, so it's along this newly improved alleyway behind or parallel to Watauga Street. This is the main house that's fronting on Watauga Street. As a refresher, in your packet, just so you guys aren't confused, when the initial resubmittal came in, there was a question as to whether or not they would, it's kind of complicated, but because this was a major subdivision, this parcel, when it was proposed, was landlocked, and if you're going to propose a subdivision for a new lot, it has to have road frontage. And so they had to improve the alleyway as part of their subdivision approval. And because of the amount of paved area calculation in the alley and proposed on the lot, there was, if you exceed 50% pervious area, you have to meet stormwater requirements and provide a bioretention area, which there was some question as to whether that was going to be required when the resubmittal came in. So there's a revised set of plans in there that show it without the little garage structure, but since then it's gone back the other way, and they aren't required to meet the stormwater requirement. So then there's a third resubmittal that has the second resubmittal that has the little garage structure added back in. So just to make sure you all understood what was happening in your plan set. This is the revised front elevation. We spent a good bit of time last meeting talking about the little dormer / gable end porch that is projecting off of the front elevation of the little accessory structure. I think there was general discussion about some ideas about how it might be improved and better be consistent with the primary structure, and really the structure itself. It's sort of slightly off center, but not wholly. The porch projection wasn't very deep based on the setbacks for the lot. So there's definitely some constraints here. I still am having a little bit of trouble finding a relationship between the two structures. To be honest, I think they're, like we agreed, I think last time, or came to the consensus last time, that the structure is pretty far away from the main house, but I still think the standard is clear that it has to have some relationship with that primary structure that it was subdivided from. And I'm still not sure there's architecturally anything about this building that kind of speaks to the main house. So I'll leave that open for discussion. I did just include all the elevations here just as a point of reference. None of the other elevations have changed, just the front based on the discussion from last time. And then I did a side-by-side of my slides of this, the primary structure and the little accessory structure. I think part of, aside from now the way that that has been redesigned on the front porch area, the window placement is kind of odd because you have like these two windows kind of spaced this much apart, then these two windows spaced this much apart, and then these two windows spaced, they're grouped together, and it's just sort of unusual. I'm not finding consistency, I guess, with other historic accessory structures or primary structures in my mind. So I'll let the architect speak to the changes that they made and present their arguments to you. I think it's subjective, obviously, because we're talking about just the design relationship and how much they do or do not work together. Yeah, that was my main concern. I think I did ask for a few additional items, including the garage door specs, example image of the proposed boulder wall in the backyard, and then we still need the mechanical unit specifications. These are all minor things that we could review down the road as conditions if you all were comfortable with staff looking at those, but just noting those in the report that those items are still outstanding. So any questions for me?
Can you clarify why the stormwater retention did not apply to this project?
They didn't exceed the 50% threshold of paved area. They calculated the amount of paved area with the roadway and then the footprint of the new features in the driveway and walkways, anything that's, well, I guess the walkways are impervious, but anything that's, anything that's impervious is calculated as kind of if you meet this 50%. I'm gonna let the architect explain this because this is not something that I do typically review in my day-to-day is stormwater calculation. So I'll let her explain it to you.
Hi, I'm Diana Belgowan. I'm the architect for the project. And I usually don't deal with subdivisions either, but my understanding is that when you're creating a major subdivision, that there's a limitation. If you have more than 50% impervious, that's including all road structures, et cetera, that stormwater kicks in. On this project, they consider that to include anything on the newly formed lot and anything in the city's right-of-way where the alley was. So the back and forth about it was originally, I guess, there was an approved alley that was 12-foot wide, and then it changed to 10-foot wide. Later plans showed the alley stopping, not going the full length in front of this lot. So the amount of pavement in the alley was kind of a moving target. But the requirement for the bioretention would have taken up a lot on a very little site, so we were trying to avoid that. And in the end, the subdivision approval needed to be revised because they reduced the width of the alley to 10 feet. And that wasn't shown on approved plans. And so when we did the calculations, at that point, the civil engineer, just as preliminary, thought we were over the amount, and therefore we wouldn't be able, we needed to reduce it by 615 square feet, which is basically our garage plus a little bit of driveway. So that's why we submitted that first set of plans, thinking that we just needed to get there. And then when he did his full calculations and extended the alley the full length of this lot, he determined that we're just under 50%. And so, like regular residential lots, there is no requirement. It's because of the major subdivision that created this particular lot that the bioretention would, and normally also subdivisions are, multiple lots. This is just a kind of really unusual way of approving, but it was the only way to get this lot created, is how I've been told, so. Does that,
Yes.
okay. And then, should I just stay up?
Keep going.
Okay. And then, I don't know if we want to, we did bring along, I didn't submit them to you, our garage door, our mechanical equipment, and a photo example of another boulder wall that's being built by this contractor. The thing I would say, we can put them up, but the problem is, because their windows are black and their garage door will be black, it might be better to pass them around. I don't, yeah. So that's all of them grouped together for review. The one thing I would say with this particular garage door, we believe that it is a smooth metal, but we need to verify that. So if it's a look that's agreeable to the commission, I think we should maybe still include in the approval something saying, pending confirmation that this is smooth metal and not wood embossed. We think it is, but we have not gotten a response back from the folks at Lowe's, so we're holding off on that. And then as far as the modifications from the last time, so what we did is we took that dormer, because we discussed that it was, kind of insignificant and made the building look too long and ranch-like. And a single-floor house on this property is going to be long physically by nature, but trying to give the front more interest, we pulled the dormer forward so that it kind of created a porch that extends slightly beyond the front wall of the building. We talked last time about the siding being different, and it was preferred for it to be different from the main house, not also shake siding. So we're still doing the lap siding here. The dormer's not in the middle, but I would argue that on the main structure that we're basing this on, it's not a fully symmetrical building either. And we were trying to emulate that building in terms of the slope of the roof and the main hip, which is the larger portion of the roof, using the 6/1 windows, which is a detail used on that structure, mimicking it in terms of using similar detailing in the columns. And also, just if you look at the front elevation of the Watauga house and this, we're using the same sort of window pattern. If you look on the porch, make sure my right side is your right side as you're looking at it. Sorry, I get confused. But if you look on the right side of the Watauga house, they have a double window underneath the little hip extension. And on the left side, they have two separated windows. And so we were just trying to, these are two different buildings. They're 120 feet apart. This one faces an alley, that one faces a major thoroughfare, and there's a woodlands in between them and a valley. So it's not going to look, it's going to look like it was a separate small structure for grandma or whatever that someone built on this property. It's not going to really ever, because of its siding, look like, the garage or something that was always in use by the people who lived in Watauga. And I think last time we discussed a lot about how the other structures along this alley are kind of doing, similar siding and that sort of thing. So we think that this is an appropriate look. We also discussed adding handrails or railings on this porch. The thing I would say, the owners don't want railings because of the maintenance required with wood railings, and also because it's not a very deep porch, it's only 7 foot deep, and then you're gonna have a railing. So it's gonna feel very enclosed, it's got a very high ceiling. Additionally, historically in Montford, many houses, buildings have wood railings, typically with pickets is very common, but there are also a number of examples of existing historic structures that do not, when the porch is low to the ground, there are many examples. I photographed 5, I only have a photo of one with me, where railings were not part of the historic structure. So we're thinking, especially since this was a building on an alley and not a main building, it wouldn't have been as decorative or articulated as a main structure on a major thoroughfare. So we think that this is an appropriate design for this. So I guess that's all I can think of to say unless there's any questions.
You're pretty comfortable that the grade, as it slopes down towards the one side of the building, won't require a handrail on that part of the front porch?
Yeah, we're under 30 inches. And realistically, you know, we don't have a lot of room if we look at a plan, and I'm sorry, I'm really bad at using your thing here. But basically, that porch only sticks out like 2 feet, so it's like little gap and column, so
Right.
nobody's like falling off that side.
Do you want to go to the site plan? Is that what you want to do?
Yeah, the floor plan, just to show it. I think it would have been built, oh, we have them different.
Yeah, we have to label everything differently.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Because I had it memorized, it was like building 2
No
in my
worries.
PDF.
No worries.
Or actually, any of those, yeah. So here you can see how the porch, you know, because of the limitations of our property setbacks, it only sticks out about a little over 2 feet from the main building, and then the rest of the porch is inset to make it work.
Any questions for the applicant? We're going to briefly open the floor for public comment, and then we'll have some further discussion. Anyone here for public comment on this particular application? Then we will close the floor for public comment. Commissioners, any discussion on this application before we move forward?
I do agree with Alex. I just don't see, and I think I said this at the last meeting, I just don't see any reference to Montfort in general in the design.
And Madam Chair, I would actually say that I think with the reference to the building envelope and the overall massing, with the central recess and the 2 outer projections, the overall roof form, and the window configuration, given the distance of the building from the main structure, given the topography and the way in which these 2 buildings are unlikely to be viewed together, that the exterior envelope and the rhythm and balance of the perforations on the facade are sufficient to refer as reference to the main structure to meet the guidelines. With that said, I recognize that mine is just one opinion.
I think I tend to share your opinion, and I've struggled. I think this is a weird property because it is kind of an accessory relationship, but it's also its own property. It's not a normal accessory structure relationship that we have certainly reviewed numerous times throughout Montfort. And I think I tend to lean in that direction as well, and I appreciate the articulation of that by the architect in terms of the efforts that they have tried to make to reference back to the Watauga Street house. You know, it's a challenging site with a strange relationship to the street, to the house on Watauga Street too. So, other folks have comments?
I tend to agree as well, particularly since the way these new structures are situated with the existing building on Watauga Street, you wouldn't really see them side by side. They're almost back, you know, their backs face each other, and then there's wooded land between them. So I don't tend to feel that it's, you know, the fact that they're not kind of similar, I don't think would be very apparent.
Other comments, or anyone have concerns? Or want to take us in another direction on the conversation? Does silence mean that there's some consensus around a motion? Pardon?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Okay. Okay. If there's somebody that would like to make a motion?
Madam Chair, I will attempt to make my very first motion. So,
We'll help you.
okay, thank you. Madam Chair, based on the evidence presented to this commission, including Exhibit A, application and project description, 4 pages, Exhibit B, new construction worksheet, 4 pages, Exhibit C, photos of subject property, 9 pages, Exhibit D, site plans, 3 pages, Exhibit E, plans and drawings, 6 pages, Exhibit F, manufacturer specifications, 26 pages, including the materials submitted at the meeting this evening. Exhibit G, revised site plan, received February 3rd, 2023. Exhibit H, Sanborn fire insurance maps, 2 pages, added by staff February 6th, 2023. Exhibit I, revised front elevation, received February 6th, 2023. Exhibit J, streetscape drawing, received February 6th, 2023. Exhibit K, lighting specifications, 6 pages, received February 6th, 2023. Exhibit L, garage door specifications, 2 pages, received February 6th, 2023. Exhibit M, revised new construction worksheet, 4 pages, received February 7th, 2023. Exhibit N, revised landscape plans, 2 pages, received February 7th, 2023. Exhibit O, revised siding specifications, 2 pages, received February 7th, 2023. Exhibit P, revised application, 53 pages, received February 15th, 2023. Exhibit Q, revised application, 55 pages, received February 27th, 2023. And
I think you need to read the individual exhibits that were submitted today by themselves. So Exhibit R, garage door specifications, I think were 3 pages.
Exhibit R, garage door specifications, 3 pages, correct?
Sorry, Exhibit S would be the mechanical unit specifications.
Exhibit S, mechanical unit specifications.
And T is the retaining wall example.
In Exhibit T, the retaining wall example with the rocks specified. And the commission's actual inspection and review of the subject properties by all members. All members? All members. I move that this commission approve the certificate of appropriateness application based on the following. That the application is a request to construct a new 1-story, 1,650 square foot primary structure with stucco foundation, smooth LP smart siding with 6-inch reveal, smooth LP trim, and certainteed landmark asphalt shingle roof in colonial slate color. The front entry will be within a small inset porch with a 10-inch by 10-inch wood support columns, wood steps, and stuccoed pier foundation screened. Wood windows will be black sun aluminum clad 6/1 simulated divided light double hung and 6 light simulated divided light casement. Doors will be black single light aluminum clad. They will construct a new 1-story, 529 square foot accessory structure with materials and features matching the new primary structure. Garage doors will be black steel with transoms. Structure will have a reduced 4-foot side setback per flexible development standards. They will construct an 18-foot wide concrete driveway from the alley to the accessory structure and construct a crushed stone walkways edged with brick between structures and driveway and primary structure. Construct a stone retaining wall adjacent to the rear elevation of the new primary structure. Install one mechanical unit adjacent to rear elevation. Remove 16 mature trees to accommodate the construction. The foundation plantings will be installed. Ground cover must be established within 15 days of completion of construction, and the remainder of the landscaping must be installed within 3 years. If archaeological resources are discovered during site work, work will cease until the city staff have been notified and have inspected the site. All work will be in accordance with attached and approved drawings and plans. All permits, variances, or approvals as required by law must be obtained before work may commence. That the standards for new construction, primary structures found on pages 92 to 93, carriage houses, garages, and accessory structures on pages 34 to 35, walkways, driveways, and off-street parking on pages 50 to 51, landscaping and trees on pages 40 to 41, fences and walls on pages 36 to 37, utilities and mechanical systems on pages 82 to 83, lighting on pages 42 to 43, and archaeology on pages 32 to 33 in the Montford Historic District Design Review Standards, adopted on April 14th, 2010, and amended on December 9th, 2019, and the standards for flexible development found in UDO Chapter 711.7 were used to evaluate this request. The application does meet the design standards for the following reasons. The new primary structure is cited so that it is similar to the historic pattern in terms of orientation, setback, retention of green space, and spacing between structures. New primary structure is designed so that the overall character of the adjacent streetscape and building is maintained. New primary structure is compatible in height, roof form, scale, massing, footprint, material, detail, fenestration, and proportion with the surrounding historic buildings and other historic buildings in the district. The location and size of window and door openings are compatible in placement, orientation, spacing, proportion, size, and scale with surrounding historic buildings. Materials and finishes are typical of those found in the district. Proportion of the accessory structure is compatible with the primary structure in terms of height, footprint, massing. The accessory structure is not more than 30% of the scale of the primary structure and is not taller than 1.5 stories. The accessory structure has a traditional roof form, materials, and details compatible with the primary structure and other accessory structures in the district. New walkways and retaining wall will be compatible with a site and district in terms of dimension, configuration, materials, color, and texture. Protective fencing will be installed around critical root zones of existing mature trees. The mechanical unit will be located on the side and rear elevations and screened with plantings. Number 4, that the action and improvements proposed in the application before us for a certificate of appropriateness are congruous with the special historic character of the Montford Historic District.
Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Based on the do I keep going? Mm-hmm. Okay. Based on the foregoing findings, for the reasons set forth therein, I move that a certificate of appropriateness be issued
with the following condition, that they're going to follow up and confirm the texture of the garage doors.
That the applicant or applicant's representative will follow up with staff to verify the texture of the garage doors.
Mm-hmm. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
That motion carries. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. We're going to move to the next item on our agenda. We're into new business. Local landmark at 570 Walton Street, it's the Walton Street Park. We'll start with our staff report from Alex.
Okay, thank you. So I know we have a fair amount of new folks, so I'm going to just give a little bit of historical context about this site. So Walton Street Park is located pretty much at the very south of the South Side neighborhood. It's a municipal park that was, I think, created in, I'm not sure what year the park was created, but the pool that's there was built in 1948, I believe. Didn't bring my cheat sheet of notes about the history of the park. I kind of skipped over that before I came to talk to you. But essentially, it is a historic park. It does have a pool and pool house that are contributing resources to the site. The park was actually designated as a local historic landmark back in October, I believe, of 2022. So it's our newest and 50th landmark in Buncombe County. And only one of a very small handful of landmarks that we have that are specifically significant for their association with African American life in Asheville. So it's a very historically and culturally significant place. So we did, for the landmark designation, usually we're considering landmarks for private property, where we don't necessarily need to go out to the community and do a big ask of what the community thinks about this designation. But being that this is a publicly owned park, a place that the community enjoys and shares, we embarked upon, thanks to our Parks Department, who was already well engaged with the community and initiating a process to get input from the community on improved park amenities. They let us tack on our community engagement for the landmark designation. So we spent, gosh, probably close to a year on those engagement efforts. We attended lots of different events. Parks in particular were at multiple events throughout the months that we were asking the community to share their thoughts with us. So it really was a great opportunity for us that we don't typically have to do engagement around landmarks. So all of that being said, the community was, like, I think maybe between 80 and 90% supportive of the landmark designation, so we're excited to see that. But Parks Ask was, again, the improved parks amenities. So they have, I think, $500,000 budgeted to improve other parts of the park, not the pool or the pool house at this time, but other parts of the park. So so this is just a parcel map to show you where we're talking about. And then on the next slide, I pulled out from the application the aerial photo where you can see the pool and the associated pool house next to it. Again, those are the contributing resources. If you read the landmark designation report, those are the contributing resources. And then there's the softball diamond that you see on your right, basketball courts. There's also surface parking and a picnic shelter area, and then a little playground equipment area adjacent to the picnic shelter. So the softball diamond and the basketball court did come later than the pool and pool house, so they're listed as not contributing features. Over our time engaging with the community, we learned that the community really doesn't utilize the softball field. It's not something that they want to be there, I don't think. Because of that, they really want a feature that they're going to use, and that will be, an amenity for them. So the softball diamond is also partly on a neighboring parcel, so it's not even fully on the park part. Not sure how that happened, but in any case, so as part of this proposal, the Parks Department is proposing to remove the baseball diamond, so all the fencing, all the lighting, et cetera, and to replace it with a walking track. Hopefully you can see the basketball court too. It's just to the north of the pool, between the pool and the surface parking area. So kind of hard to see because the plan is so light, but on your right-hand side is the big, there'll be an asphalt walking path that goes around like kind of a grassy multi-use, we're calling a multi-use field that, can be used for a variety of different things. And then the the basketball court at this point in time is oriented to be east-west facing. So if you're playing basketball and it might, like, the sun is going to be in your eye, right? So that wasn't very well thought out. And so the plan is, sorry, my throat is really dry today. the plan is to relocate the basketball court to be just to the north of the pool house building. And in part, that was because, it's my understanding from talking with our park staff, that the grading towards the street side of the property, the grade is pretty steep there. So ideally, they could move it over to this area where it would be more flat. And they wouldn't have to excavate as much or regrade as much. So that's the proposal, is to relocate the basketball court. Obviously, we would have all new surfacing with concrete walkway around it that would then connect into the new walking path that would go around the multi-use field. They're also proposing some new site lighting. I think it's will be fixtures every 90 feet along the path, I think is the requirement, but we've just noted that we'll need a finalized lighting plan once that's available. And then they're also going to replace the playground equipment, but the playground equipment has not been selected yet. They're working with the youth in the community to try to pick out which exact playground equipment they want. So I'm not noting any concerns, just those couple of items that we'll need down the road whenever they're available. So any questions from you all?
What are the plans for the existing pool house?
There's no plan on the table right now for the pool or the pool house.
You mean, so they'll stay as is?
Yes, yeah.
Are they even open right now?
No. No, they've been closed for 2 years. And I think Parks does have some money in their budget for that eventually when we get to that part, but that's a different ask of the community in terms of how they want to repurpose those spaces. Because there's a new pool being constructed down the street at the Grant Center.
Alex, are there any plans to, for the parking, to improve the existing parking?
Not included in this plan, but maybe Parks can say if there's some future plan for that.
And I ask because the design of the parking as shown in the plan that you're displaying now is different from what we see in the aerial.
I think a lot of what we've been kind of working with are conceptual plans.
Okay.
And so this may be just a conceptual plan, but that's not included in what's being proposed to you all today.
Okay.
So I guess whenever they're ready to move forward with that as a change, that will come back.
Okay.
There's no new landscaping proposed?
Not yet. There was some shown, I think on the first set of plans they submitted, some kind of, again, it was conceptual, and Susanna and I in Parks have since met and clarified that, their conceptual rendering is showing some other things, but meant to only include those 4 things: the walking track and multi-use field, the basketball court being moved, new playground equipment, the walkway around the basketball court, and the site lighting.
Okay. Other questions for Alex? Okay, we could hear from the applicant.
Thank you. I was just going to tell you, I have your, just my slides are there, but this folder of all your stuff is here too if you want to go through anything else that I didn't show.
If you'll just state your name first.
Sure. I'm Peter Wall, the Assistant Director for Parks and Recreation for the City of Asheville. Alex did a great job presenting all the facts, so I won't go over any more of that, but I will say we are very excited to be at this point on this project. I've been with the Parks Department for about 10 years now, and this has been a project that has been part of our capital planning for all of that time. We're excited. Obviously, she told you about all of the public engagement that went into this project, and we're looking forward to moving forward. So, any questions for me?
Any questions? Okay, we're going to open the floor for public comment. There is any? Predictably, there is not. And we will close the floor for public comment. Any further discussion from commissioners? We ready for a motion?
Yes, I'll agree to do the motion. This is also my first one.
It's a new era.
Easier. Okay, so please let me know if I need to revise something. Okay. Madam Chair, based on the evidence presented to this commission, including Exhibit A, application and project description, 3 pages, Exhibit B, site plan and photos, 2 pages, Exhibit C, landmark designation report, 42 pages, Exhibit D, landmark designation ordinance, 4 pages, Exhibit E, revised site plan and photos, 2 pages received February 28th, 2023, Exhibit F, revised site plan and photos, 2 pages received March 2nd, 2023, Exhibit G, no Exhibit G, okay, and the Commission's actual inspection and review of subject property by all members except. I move that this commission approve the certificate of appropriateness based on the following. 1, that the application is to remove existing basketball court and construct new 50-foot by 84-foot paved basketball court with 6 basketball goals between parking lot and pool house. Construct new concrete paved walkway around court, replace existing playground equipment with new equipment in same location, remove softball diamond and lighting, and install 8-foot wide asphalt parking path around grassy multi-use field, install new 12-foot tall Duke Sanibel LED light fixtures at various locations around the walking path. All work will be in accordance with attached and approved drawings and plans. All permits, variances, or approvals as required by law must be obtained before work may commence. 2, that the Secretary of Interior's standards for rehabilitation, specifically the standards for site and setting, were used to evaluate this request. 3, this application does meet the design standards for the following reasons. A, basketball court, baseball diamond, and playground equipment are not contributing resources to the site. B, existing contributing and character-defining features are being retained and preserved and will retain their relationship to the landscape. C, the historic relationship between buildings and landscape features of the setting are being retained. D, new or replaced features are compatible with the historic character of the site and setting in terms of size, scale, design, material, color, and texture. 4, that the action and improvements proposed in the application before us for a certificate of appropriateness are congruous with the special historic character of Walton Street Park and Pool.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries.
And based upon the foregoing findings and for reasons set forth therein, I move that a certificate of appropriateness be issued.
We've got 2 conditions. One is the playground equipment specifications, and the other is a lighting plan, site lighting plan.
With the following conditions, that the playground equipment specifications be submitted, as well as the lighting plan.
That could be to staff? Yeah.
Just submitted to staff for review.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That motion also carries.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item on our agenda is new business in Montford at 8 Houston Street. We'll start with our staff report.
All right, moving along. So again, just to give you some context, the parcel map on the top left shows the subject property highlighted in red. It's a 0.09 acre vacant lot on Houston Street. This is also a pretty newly subdivided lot. I think it was year before last, maybe. And then on the right-hand side is the proposed site plan. If any of you are familiar with these lots that were subdivided, it basically is a big hole. I know the property owner is here. He built on the other side on Cortland. Some of you probably remember that project too. Has tricky terrain here. So the lots are pretty small. There's not a lot of room for parking. So they're probably going to all look pretty similar with really tight parking footprint, right up close to the building. So I'm just going to go really quickly. I only have a few slides here. These are the proposed elevation drawings. The one thing I did note, and this is just me being pretty nitpicky, I'm not going to take a strong stance on this, and it certainly has nothing to do with aesthetic, but the windows on the front elevation, you see on the bottom right-hand side, the single, so you've got like the divided light windows on either side and then the single light window within. That sort of reads more mid-century to me, or contemporary, rather than truer to the historic fenestration styles found in Montford, or that were within the period of significance at least. So that was really the only thing that I noted on the front. And then there, if you see, there's also an entry door beyond the front entry to the right of it along the driveway. There's a secondary entrance there. And also on the rear, those two doors are 4 light doors, which I think is also kind of, I don't think I've seen a pedestrian door with just 4 lights in it in Montford before. So, and I communicated this to the architect about a different project, and he changed it. So, but the property owner is here today. The architect's not here today, so I'll let him speak to that. But I just noted that perhaps like a 8-light door or 15-light door would be more appropriate. And let's see, they are proposing standing seam metal roof in addition to asphalt shingle. That's not something that the commission in the past has not been supportive of, because historically buildings in Montford only utilized one roofing material. I say that with the caveat that you all approved that at the multifamily building on Elizabeth Place. So I'm assuming that the commission has some comfort level with it, but I still note it as a concern because I don't think it's necessarily consistent with historic architectural styles in Montford. I also noted that they are proposing crepe myrtles as part of their site plan, their landscaping plan, and I think there's probably certainly better species that could be planted on that site. I think crepe myrtles are not particularly, I think they're easy to grow here, but they're not invasive, I don't think, but I would suggest a more native-friendly species, I guess. And then we've asked for a few other items, just the exact window specifications called out, a revised site plan to show the railing along the driveway. That's something that, let me pull that up. I didn't think I included that in any of the plans exactly. So you can kind of see it on the side elevation, and if you're looking north, the end of the parking, end of the driveway has, because of the drop off, it will have a retaining wall at the end and around the side. And so it will need to have a railing on the top of it, which is kind of unusual. If you read the standards and you consider it as a fence, it's actually not allowed in Montford. Not allowed to have fences on top of retaining walls. But I suppose there's an interpretation you could make that it's a railing and not a fence. And this is kind of unusual. We haven't had this come up before. So let me see if I can find something in their plans that shows that a little more clearly.
Was that
Yeah, you can see it better in the perspective rendering on the
Yeah.
bottom left.
So the parking is at the at the first floor, the main floor level,
Right, like if you're.
inside of that fenced.
Yeah, if you are
railing
looking
area.
at the front on this bottom right rendering,
Mhm.
you can see that it is, you driving out the street and then it wraps around the side of it. So we just don't have a detail of that drawing either, so I'm not, I don't know. I don't know what the alternative is, I guess. And it has to have that for building code. So the only alternative is to make the wall taller, and I don't know whether it
Not
looks-
really precedent for that either.
just would mean a taller wall, you know, which wouldn't necessarily impact this property so much as it would how you see it from the neighboring property, but, and you could screen it with landscaping, but, so just something that to think about as we're discussing this item. I asked for some clarification on siding colors. It seems like they're have in multiple places this kind of darker color palette, but then if you look at the siding specs, they call out different colors, so I just want to make sure that we're clear on that. I also wanted to know, or make sure I understand, a lot of times walkways and little landings and things are kind of not top of mind when you're this early on in a design of a project, but if you look at the site plan, the deck that's on the back of the house, it doesn't have a railing on the north side because it becomes, becomes roughly flush with the yard there on that side. So they don't need a railing, which is fine. I'm not noting anything about that, but then where do you go? Like, are you just walking out into the grass? Are you going into a walkway? What's happening here? So that I think we need to get clear on. We need stone sample and, as always, mechanical unit specifications. So that's they can leave that out of this approval too if they want to, and just apply for minor work down the road when they're ready, if that's better for their timeline. So.
Alex, presuming that this, that's a long list of items, are you comfortable with all of those being staff level things?
Yeah, definitely.
If we get to that point today?
Yes, definitely. I think as long as you all are find a way where you're okay with whatever's happening with the railing, I think it's all just little details that we need for our file, not necessarily anything that's substantive. And then I did also just include in my slides, probably easier for you to see in your packet, but this is their streetscape rendering, just to show the building in context. This section of Montford around, actually this is one of my favorite parts of Montford because just the styles of houses are so different. So I think there's certainly room for creativity and design style. I did, when I first met with the applicant, I did sort of have a little bit of heartburn about the front entryway being not more kind of pronounced or having more of a presence on the front elevation, but in thinking back in some of the other approvals the commission's issued in recent times, I don't think it's kind of out of line with those, but
Questions for Alex?
Yes, I do. Regarding the crepe myrtle that you said you thought could be replaced with a better species, is the crepe myrtle on the invasive species list?
not in the Montford recommended species.
Okay, and it's not on the recommended species list, or is it?
No, it's not.
So it's not prohibited, and it's not, and
there's nothing that clearly talks about crepe myrtles being congruous or incongruous with the character of Montford. Okay. My second question is about the railing. I was looking at the guidelines for fences and walls, and the one that specifically cited that fences cannot be located on top of retaining walls. It specifies in front yards. Now, a portion of this is in the front yard, but it's on the side of the property. So a question I have about interpreting the guidelines is, was that intended to mean at the front of the property when the guideline was written, or was it meant to be in any portion of the front yard?
It's any portion that extends beyond the front plane of the building.
Even though it's technically on the side? Okay. Then where is the side yard lot line relative to the retaining wall?
Nearly on it.
Okay.
Right, it's, if you look at the site plan, it's like the dashed line is that's the property line, so it's just within that. So there's not really room to screen it with landscaping.
Okay. That's what I was asking. Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Other questions for Alex?
On the elevations, the guardrails appear to be metal. The detail of the guardrail is a 2x2 wood picket. I'm wondering which one is intended.
I believe it's supposed to be wood picket, at least the way it's rendered. It looks like the deck railing. But it could be maybe they're noting that the railing around the driveway is metal and the deck railing is wood. I don't know. That hopefully the property owner can answer that question.
Other questions for Alex? Okay, we could hear from the applicant.
Hey, Erin. I've got, so like, I just had my few slides, obviously, but all of your plans are here.
Okay.
If you want to open anything else up that I
I
did.
just want to make sure we're contemplating the most current change after the conversation that Aaron had with you. Did you see the 3.6 changes he made?
No, he hasn't sent me anything.
Oof, that's an oversight on his part. That's why I was looking at it, I didn't see it. Hi, I'm Aaron Zallen. We've met virtually before from my last project on 81 Cortland. So that was an interesting experience. No, not with you folks, but with the person who built the house. That was a bit of a challenge for me, being out of the country for quite some time. So it posed a lot of challenges, and I learned a lot through that process. So consequently, going forward, I'm the property owner and will be the property developer going forward as well. And I get my general contractor's license in the state of North Carolina, I would be the general contractor too. I have them in other states, but they do not apply here. So there is a more recent, I think the input was taken between Aaron Wilson and Alex, and the inputs were taken, and first I'm fairly open to making any necessary changes that the commission sees appropriate. I'm not wedded to really anything other than the structure being a certain size and shape and maximizing the footprint of the building envelope and doing what's best in terms of trying to get some off-street parking, because that street in particular, Houston, which was a big part of our discussion last time, is really tight, and I think it almost acts like a one-lane road because so many people park on the street. So there is a more recent drawing I'd be glad to send over. I was away and those changes were made on the 6th.
Right, which is super quick.
Yeah, he turned the changes over and he must have neglected to send them. He sent them to me, but I just kind of I sent them an email and I just assumed he sent this. My apologies. But the changes that Alex had requested were all acceptable, and we did make those changes, and I can talk specifically about some of the points that Alex raised, and we made those changes.
Yeah,
So we're not.
You want to talk through specifically what those are? Because I think we could, when we get to that point, make some amendments to the application as is.
Sure.
With a follow-up to those items if we think that they're moving in the direction that responds to those comments.
Do you try to think that we could probably, do you have them in your email?
Yeah, I have them on my laptop.
Can you send them to me really quickly?
If we have a Wi-Fi connection.
Yes, guest wireless though.
Do you want me to do it right now? Yeah?
Yeah, I
That
mean,
seems like it would probably be helpful.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's okay, because in olden days, we used to present hard copies on projectors, and you could bring whatever you wanted to. I mean, it's our new digital age, where you can just send it to me. So you just go on the guest wireless, your next laptop doesn't recognize the network, and then it's kind of want you to put your phone number in there, and then I'll send you a authorization code. I think so.
Hey, Alex, I do have one question. I wasn't fast enough. The deck appears to be outside of the rear setback. Is that allowed?
It's permissible.
Is there a variance for that?
A deck can encroach into the rear setback. I think it just can't be any closer than 6 feet to the rear property boundary, like an uncovered deck.
Yeah. Do you have an app? Where did you go? I know, but I don't think you have, it's on your passport. The city's parking meters don't.
They do, I took a picture.
I need to pay closer attention then, because mine, I kept thinking it wasn't. I take my chances after about 5:30. I just decide I'm not gonna fiddle with it in the middle of this meeting and I take my chances.
Yeah, no, I
It's worked out okay so far. Call my new friend Maggie and she'll fix it for me. Getting hungry. The office is right across the street from that New Orleans coffee shop that serves beignets. It's a problem. My office is, there's a New Orleans coffee shop in the Grove Arcade that serves makes beignets fresh. That's right across the street.
That's okay.
It's a problem.
They're really good, I've had.
It's delicious. I had some today. It's delicious. But it's problematic. My old office was right above.
Okay, I'll give it a second.
It's a problem. It is. It's a really big problem.
We ready? Sorry,
we
I
got a little
haven't gotten the
distracted.
email yet, but, oh, here it is, okay.
Okay.
We're gonna get a new set.
Well, we'll look at it on the screen and then it'll go in our folder at some point today.
Any particular, do you want me to just go to the elevation?
Yeah, just go to the, I think we go
Oh,
to the
yeah.
first screen, the first one. We can
Yeah.
kind of work our way from there.
Okay.
Okay, super. Thanks. Sorry about that. I
That's all right.
apologize. Can everybody see it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. So I think what's so just, this lot had, let me talk at a macro level. It had its own set of challenges. And sadly, there's a very beautiful tree, unfortunately, that has to be taken down. It's quite large, and I feel conflicted about that, but it's sitting right in the building envelope, and I will make sure that I, add commensurate trees and want to add more trees in the future. The lot, as you can see, has a different setup than the lot on Cortlandt. It's more symmetrical, which is great. However, on the right side of the property, it's quite high, relatively speaking, and it dies very precipitously in the left side corner. So the intent was to squeeze the building envelope, actually, squeeze the footprint of the building as much as I could and nudge it as far as I could over to the right side, because it just drops. I have a personal issue with having these giant crawl spaces that look like, most of the stuff on Houston is like 4 stories, and they're, I don't know, it's, I understand it, but that I'm trying to avoid. So we try to mitigate the crawl space while bringing the house up to a certain level where it wasn't overwhelming the surrounding houses. So there's a fine line to dance there. And that's why you see that, to your question, Annie, it's moved a foot from the right side setback, from the right side property line. So we kept the foot to be safe, so we can do something. And, I don't love retaining walls personally, but in this case, in order to get away from some parking in the front and do something on the side to relieve that pressure from the street, and that is the only kind of viable option. And you can see it goes from about 2 feet in the inception of the retaining wall to about 6. And again, we went back and forth about raising the house even further or lowering it to make that retaining wall less obtrusive. The precedence with Cortlandt, if you remember, we also did similar things, and there is a precedence there. Alex, remember we were asked to, it's the same situation, it's about 6 inches above the parking surface, and we ended having to add a 18-inch pressure-treated rail system after the fact, where it was required.
I would say that's not a great example, because that didn't come back through for review, so.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was plenty of
It
them.
was the building inspector.
The building inspector, I might, again, poor assumption, that they confer with you on appropriateness. Maybe they're doing it based on international building code. So it's probably not a precedence we want to go for, but I think the overarching thing is I'm willing to do whatever is appropriate to do there to make it compliant. So if you look at, so the couple things Alex raised are accurate. The one where you can see kind of in this bubble, these like sort of bubble things that he adds. The red indicates the rail on top, whatever that may be, open to interpretation and TBD. Again, open to whatever would be appropriate for the area. The walkway, which again got done at Cortlandt without me sort of even having intervention, is pure just concrete. I don't like it, but it was done. So I think the intention here is to do something more design-oriented with Tennessee flagstones, some large boulders, more interesting, and more appropriate to the neighborhood, and even do like a process aggregate driveway. I know it's impervious, and I'm willing to do a pervious one too, if you believe I should do just some compacted road base and some crushed stone too. So again, very open to the material use to keep compliant or keep appropriate to the area. Alex was referring to the deck in the rear on the right side. It drops quite precipitously to the left. So it's a little bit vague of how that does terminate. So what Aaron did was put the rail on the end and create a gate. So people don't drop off the edge, and we're not clear yet how the final grading will come. So my feeling is there probably will be a step or two off that, and certainly if there is, you want a gate so people don't, take a header off the end of the. We don't want anybody falling and hurting themselves. But I don't, again, how close that will be to the final grade, it's hard to say, right? The trash was an area too, if you see in the left corner, it's a bit of a fit for that and what we do. I know from what I understand, the intent is not to have the barrels sitting at the end of the driveway because they're ugly. I mean, so what do? Without having any really usable land on the right side to get back to the area and having to put the HVAC on that right side behind that foundation area, which is an appropriate place where it keeps it out of sight. I'm open to ideas there. I don't know if putting a small fenced-in sort of enclosure near the property line on the left side would suffice. You can see that structure Aaron put there on the left near the edge of the property in the front. You guys see that? Yeah, so that's something that I want some guidance on. The other open issues were, this plants, and what Aaron did on this too, you can see he numbered some of the plants, because if you go down slightly below, there's some of the type of plants we just contemplated. This crepe myrtle thing was funny because I don't even like crepe myrtles. I would gladly take that away and use something more indigenous, and that shouldn't be a problem. I'm open to whatever. I'm not a big myrtle person. So, again, I think we're trying to preserve. The thing is, there's this big planting cedar here, as you can see, it has quite a large sort of circumference. So I like that, but it does stop me sort of from adding the plantings that may or may not survive under that canopy. However, I want to, definitely will have 2 or 3 larger plants, and I think they call out as a maple and a red bud. I'm sorry, what did I just do?
Just open the attachment, just click on it. Don't download it, just click.
Sorry. We're right here?
No,
Okay.
just click, yeah.
Sorry about that, my
okay.
bad. Windows machines are not my thing. And then that sort of captures, you can see that he kind of made these little bubble areas. Those were the recent changes made after the conversation or dialogue or email thread with you, Alex. Those are the ones that Aaron made. And then there's other ones that apply to the windows and the doors, again, fully open to that. In the Cortland project, we had 2/1s, and that was okay, deemed appropriate. I think the neighbor next to me too ended up using the same windows, those Geldwin 2/1s. Again, I'm not wedded to those, but where we did make a change that Alex recommended, we had a fixed window on the upper between 2 openers, and the same below it on the front facade, 2 openers and a fixed. We changed those to 3 opening windows, which I think is more appropriate.
Will you go to the new elevations on that file?
Yeah, if you can see on the bottom right, there's the bubbles again, and I don't know why, you mentioned an 8 light window. Aaron changed it to a single light, I'm not sure why.
The door, you mean?
The doors,
No,
yeah.
I think that's fine.
Okay.
I just thought the 4, the kind of exaggerated pane size for a door.
Yeah, I don't like, on doors, I prefer, that's my preference, is a single light.
I think
but-
that's fine.
Yeah, okay. So he did do that on both the rear window, which is egress to the back deck, and then this is the egress to, which is ostensibly the laundry room / mudroom, and when you would normally come in with your car and packages and you go in. So, and then the biggest significant thing again is these window configurations, making that change. And I will be glad to provide more detail. It's sadly, Geldwin, gives you the basics, but not how big is the divided section, how big is the sash. It's really thin on information, so I need to dig further to get that information for you. Obviously, the HVAC specs too, not to be determined. The intent of this house is to make it a net zero house, no gas at all, purely electric, and pre-wired for certain types like electric vehicles and pre-wired for solar. And one of the other big things going along with that, the metal roof combination or partial metal and partial shingled roof, not an issue. I prefer to have that way. I think something that Aaron tried to do to create some visual interest. It's less expensive, likely, to go with a complete shingle roof for me, and that would be great.
And that's it's a little hard to read on the screen. That's what you're showing there. Did he make that edit?
Yes, he made that edit visually and then verbally too. I know I forgot my glasses, I can't see it.
Yeah, everything's called out on the plan, like I opened to my email and
Okay.
I'll add this to the folder.
My apologies. I talked about the walkway in Tennessee, Jeld-Wen, HVAC, and plant species. So I had quite a big laundry list of plant species and, again, open to more indigenous plants. I'm just not that familiar with them, so I have to kind of do my due diligence. Like, I need to map it against what's on the appropriate list with what I've been getting from plants from a really great place in South Carolina, Hawkins Nursery, really big. Field-grown stuff, really nice. So, again, can add all those things. And we collectively agreed with my abutting neighbor, too. We've created screening plants, try to avoid fencing. It's, so we've used, now this is where I'm going to get out of my element, but somewhere like tea olives to try to create that on the Cortland property. And I would do the same, the tea olives and langestrums. I'm probably butchering the name, I'm sorry. Yeah, so terrible. But yeah, and I did the same thing. I have blazed maples put in there. I don't know if anybody, if you go by, but I'm about, because the builder just completely punted, and it was just awful. Just threw mulch down. So I'm halfway through fixing that problem. About 35 plants I planted already. So it's a work in progress. So that's kind of, yeah, I think, in terms of net changes, yeah, I think that's it. I know the fencing thing is a concern. The footprint, we went through 3 iterations on this plan, actually. Aaron and I just kept making adjustments for exterior look and feel, and also trying to get the most leverage out of the property without giving up, giving up usable space. And I decided not, in the first property I did, like an ADU in the basement. It was quite expensive and time consuming, and had a lot of issues in terms of sound deadening and fire breaking. The lower level is purely an extension of the upstairs, but a good extension. There will be no kitchen area, but 2 full bathrooms with a bathroom and a backup washer and dryer unit too that can be installed at a later date. So I think that's kind of it.
Okay. Questions for the applicant?
The lower level basement, exterior elevation, is that a cement arch, stucco finish all the way around?
Yeah, and this time I'm going to use a synthetic stucco because we had a lot of cracking on the Cortland property, just using it with the mesh. So I think I learned, by talking to people that the synthetic stucco is actually quite more resilient, but has the same look and feel, just more money. But the other one has, of course, like I have a massive crack in the front of the house that's 6 months old. It's just, I wasn't here to.
When you say synthetic, is that like a dry component?
I'm not sure what the composition is, to be honest with you. I'm not exactly sure what the composition is, but it's something apparently that just is more stable when you're covering concrete block. Concrete block tends to, as you put it on, there's a shrinkage, and also there's a lot of visual that comes through. No matter how many coats you put on, you seem to still see the shadow of the block. And visually, I think that's pretty ugly. Not to mention the fact that it seems to crack, and I'm not sure why. We did it over superior wall. So I had superior walls on that last project, which I wouldn't do again here for other reasons. It's going to be a block foundation. we have a crawl space, and they only get to 12 feet. When you end up going beyond 12, it gets more challenging. So I don't know the exact, I can certainly get you the material, what's made with the synthetic stucco.
I don't think anyone's ever proposed synthetic stucco to this commission, so
Okay.
I think
Yeah,
it would
I
be
just-
important if most of you aren't familiar with what it looks like and the texture, et cetera, would be helpful to have a sample.
Sure.
Yep.
I can actually, no problem, that would be no problem getting that. Yeah, it's more like problem avoidance than, because correct, I don't want people calling me back and saying, my stucco cracked, like the Portland house, I'm living there. And it's pretty bad. And it's bleeding through too, like I said, the color's bleeding through from I don't know, it's unclear as to what. When you're not here to orchestrate things, it's sometimes what you get.
Can you scroll back to the site plan for me?
Sure. This one?
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about the railing and the retaining wall. And I understand, I think, the limitations of what we're dealing with. And I certainly would rather that we be proactive than let the building inspector decide how to fix it if we do nothing. So I guess we had a similar project, Alex. I'm not sure if there's anyone on the board that maybe would have remembered that big retaining wall at Montford North Star Academy that we spent a lot of time talking about the fence on that one. And what we did in that project was to pull the fence in front of the retaining wall, and we were able to do a lot more screening there. And so obviously we have a very limited maneuverability on this site, but at this scale it's a little hard to know how much, but it almost feels like the whole house could scoot towards the left property line slightly. And would it be enough to leave the retaining wall where it is, but to allow a fence that would be maybe in front of that retaining wall that could be somewhat screened? I realize that we're gonna touch the front corner, sort of the bottom corner of the house on the front setback at some point in the very near future as we sort of scoot it. And I'm not sure how close we are to reaching the boundary of where the deck can be in the back in relation to the back property line. We're obviously beyond the setback already, but if that's sort of 6 feet. I feel like there maybe wants to be some more space there to let that fence not sit right on top of the retaining wall and to be able to do some kind of a screening or something to it. I understand that it's going to be code required. I don't see a way where you're not going to have the same situation where the building inspector comes out and says, hey, you need to put this railing here. And then we're going to lose the ability to influence what it looks like in some respects. And so it just seems like a little bit more room there to pull it off the top of that wall and to give us some way to screen it or something in a similar fashion, Alex, to what we did at the North Star Academy wall, which is massive in comparison to this wall, and not as landlocked as this one. So there's two very big differences from that one, but it reminds me that seems like the only other time I can recall us really talking in great detail about this. And is there a way to accommodate both, which would be to pull the fence off the top of the...
I think it would be, obviously they're gonna have to shift it back and to the side, as you pointed out, that front building corner.
Yeah, we're gonna, it's hard to tell on this scale, and you can only zoom up, and the line weights of the drawing are kind of fat, so there's a little bit of zooming in, I think, for Aaron to do, to just feel out whether that really gains us what we need to, but it seems like maybe an important thing to dig into a little bit. And I appreciate your flexibility on the other items because it saves everybody from talking about things that you've already changed. And so I certainly think the window change made a big difference, and it certainly was in the right direction. So for me, the only real concern that I have is this the best we can do on the retaining wall and the railing and the driveway?
Yeah, I think it's important because this is going to come up again. And
Yes.
I think.
Yeah,
we need to
well, and
be clear
we're
on-
gonna only see these kinds of sites left in Montford for new primary structures, because there's a reason that nothing was built on it yet.
Yeah.
All the flattest, easiest lots were built on back in whenever, the 20s, 30s, 40s, whenever it was.
Can I just
So-
make a comment too?
Yeah.
Just, I mean, again, as I said, there's been 3 iterations of this, and one thing I did proactively, the house was actually 2 feet longer. So from the building, the building.
From front to back?
Yes, so I squeezed the front by 2 feet, shortening the living room area. And with the intent of trying to do as much as I
Yeah.
could without encroaching in the back setback, right? I want to minimize
Right.
that and keeping the building as little as possible in the back setback. The second thing, the request is for 9.5 feet on the parking, which is very skinny, right? Normally you take a 12-foot for a single
Right.
path and an 18 for a double. So that is something I was very mindful of to do too. So I'm trying to make the accommodations where I can.
Yeah.
If we have to scoot it down a little bit, as you know, we're going to get close, and moving it back a foot and then down a couple feet, yeah, it's doable.
Yeah.
Because, this drop is, as I mentioned, pretty severe. And you always make an event that you push on the balloon, the more you move things over.
It's a ripple.
Right, the wall will get incrementally taller.
And I think the wall stays where it is,
Okay,
just to give us more room between the wall and the driveway.
I get you.
You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
To give us a way to buffer and to soften that, and to
Sure.
get the fence off of the top of
Top
the
of
wall,
it,
which
yeah.
is pretty clear in the guidelines, that relationship. And that just gives us a way to sort of separate those two things in a way that will be compliant with the building code
Mm-hmm.
and allow you to plant some small plant stuff in a little bit of an aisleway there.
Yeah.
May also feel better getting out of the car, that you can swing your door open just a little bit bigger,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's super squishy already.
So the agreement though was just with the budding neighbor, which is 6 Houston, I probably should bring some photos of this. He has tea olives, and we worked on this collaboratively at one point. So he has them all along his property line, like 6 of them.
Yeah.
So ultimately, that will provide screening for that wall. Now, it doesn't.
From the natural grade elevation,
That's
not at
right.
the top of the
That's
driveway.
right, exactly. But it does provide some cover for the wall itself.
Yeah.
It does not contemplate the railing
Right.
/ fencing issue.
Whatever we're calling it.
Yeah.
Fencing or railing,
Thing
whatever.
that prevents people from falling over
Yeah.
the edge.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that's a challenge.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to, push a little bit to see if we've really got the house sitting exactly where it needs to be to help with the retaining wall. And I don't know if anyone else feels that way. I've certainly done a good bit of talking. But that probably for me is the biggest hurdle on this one, is making sure we get that right. I think I'm comfortable with the changes that you've made to the building itself. I would love to see a sample of that product. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure I know what it is, the synthetic stucco, but I want to, be good to see, because that is the first time it's come up, certainly in my time on the commission. My guess is it's probably aesthetically fine. No, it wouldn't be an ephes, that's got the insulation with it. It's the coating that, in commercial construction, we use more of an acrylic, cementitious with an acrylic additive to it, because it's more flexible to span cracks
Yeah.
and to move with the temperature changes in the building.
Provides a deeper cover too.
And there's a lot of different ways it can look. They apply it very similarly to.
Yeah,
but
I
you
seen
get
it
to
put
see
on, it's troweled on like normal
Yeah.
with a mesh backing. You apply the mesh on
Yeah.
top and.
So it'd be good just to see it, because
Sure.
it has never come up in this particular case, but I'm going to be quiet and let other people talk.
What is the retaining wall made out of? There's a note that it has a harsh or cement finish. Is it
Yeah, so
concrete
it would be-
block with a finish on it, or is it like a landscaping block?
No. We're going to do block foundation. I'll have a structural engineer come like we did on the Cortland property, make sure we put a proper footing to spread the load of it, even though it's lower than the other one. So we'll have an engineering aspect to it. So we spread out probably 4 foot wide, like a Bigfoot type of approach, and then rebar shooting up, and it'll be block. And obviously that will tie into the foundational parts of it, which will be block as well.
And finished the same way as the
Finished
base
exactly the
foundation.
same way, yeah. It's a little bit easier, frankly, to go over block than it is over a Superior wall. The Superior wall kind of comes with its own finish, so it should be a little easier to work with. But I've seen it go over the block, and it's hard to cover, and you expose yourself to cracking too. I don't like the look of it. You see these like a checkerboards thing going on from the shadows from the block itself, and it gets,
Madam Chair, I realize that, an individual case is not the time to discuss the merits of the design guidelines, which were, agreed upon with a contribution from the Montford residents many years ago. But I would suggest that we should consider in any future updates or, the new creation of design guidelines, the outright prohibition of things that might complicate future applications where conditions might not be anticipated. The prohibition of a fence, depending on what you call it, because I've actually looked up the definition of different things just now. The prohibition of a fence above a retaining wall in a front yard might not anticipate specific new construction on specific lots where such a feature might be congruous with the character of the district, or maybe not congruous, but might not be incongruous with the character of the district. A question I have for staff is there something like a glitch list where issues that come up like this, where we find, the guidelines kind of complicate our review process, where we can discuss those at like an annual meeting? Do we have something like that where we keep track of specific design guidelines that have been problematic in the review of applications?
If I had a clone, we would do that.
Understood. Fair enough, that is an acceptable response.
No, but I think if I were asked to, I could probably easily go through and pull out some of the standards where we tend to run into
struggle.
Or perhaps this board could, at an annual meeting, we could maybe collaborate on what those issues might be.
For sure. I would say the way we tend to operate in the past is, site by site, right? Like if the commission finds that you can, make a reason to approve something in one set of circumstances, and those reasons are stated in the motion, right? So that it's clear, you're not saying that
We're setting
every single
precedent,
property in the
right.
district. But I think that's what we did with the Montfort, the North Star Academy, or the Randolph School site, was that there were
Very
reasons
specific,
called out as to why it may, I don't know that it was 4 feet. I think it was, we went back and forth a lot on that one because it was like, how will you maintain landscaping that's this far away from a building?
Right.
On the other side of the fence, on top of a, 15, 20 foot tall retaining wall.
Well, it's just not safe to be on that side of the wall with the 20-foot drop off on there.
For a site like this, I can see where it might be easier, right? If
Right.
there's some like shrubbery between the fence and the wall,
Right.
you can get your garden hose out and just go like this over the fence or through the
Yeah.
fence, whatever. But to your point, yes, I think we should have a list. We have that for our development ordinance.
Mhm.
So at some point we can work on that for sure as part of the topic at retreat. But Janice, do you want to add something?
I thought you'd said early on, Alex, that there could be different interpretation
depending on whether you characterize this as a fence or a rail. And I know, Annie, you read the fence on the retaining wall standard, which didn't sound absolutely clear. You said it didn't prohibit. And then there was a question of, is that really the front yard?
Yeah.
So they've seen, and often, you can't have perfect guidelines. They have to leave some room for interpretation, and as Alex is saying, and then based on the situation, how it might meet the site or the neighborhood.
Right.
But, so I don't know if there is something you could read that said if it's a rail on top of a rail on top of the retaining wall, is that permissible? I don't know. I don't have the guidelines in front of me.
And I unfortunately navigated away from wherever I could access the guidelines. And a question that I have is your discussion or mentioning of scooting the building to the left not simply, but to bring it into compliance with the design guidelines that prohibit that configuration of a fence atop a railing or atop a retaining wall, because I have another way to interpret it? Or is it a matter of, like, just as designed, you think it's incongruous?
I would say it's in an effort to better align it with the standard and not so much about congruity. I also think I could be very clear about it not being a fence.
I was gonna say, like, if you think about what a railing is on a building, right? It's meant to guard against you.
Right, and if the building inspector is gonna require this from a code compliance standpoint, it's gonna be a guardrail. And fencing isn't something that the building inspector is going to require. So it will be because it's a guardrail and it meets the requirements in the building code because it's more than 30 inches off the ground. So it's in my perspective very clearly not a fence. I wish there was more room. I think we've created hardship a little bit because we want this house to be this big, right? If it were smaller, then the hardship goes away because we would have more room to position it on the site in a way. And there's nothing in the guidelines really that speaks to that particularly either. And I don't think it's incongruous along the streetscape or in the way that it's designed. And certainly the modifications that y'all made move it closer in the direction of being congruous also. So maybe I shouldn't care about it. Maybe I shouldn't. I mean, I wish it was different, but maybe there's not enough justification there for me to care that it.
I have a public comment at some point on that.
I will be happy to get to that in a second. We can do it in a second.
So I would offer, Janice, there are not definitions, there's not a glossary in the.
There is, but it's for architectural. Well, it's in the very back, I think, or close to the back here. Let me just see.
So while you're because I can't check on that, while you're checking on the definition of fence versus railing versus balustrade, I would offer the dictionary definition from Oxford Languages that came up online. It's simply a barrier, railing, or other upright structure, typically of wood or wire, enclosing an area of ground to mark a boundary, control access, or prevent escape.
Which this is not doing.
And a railing is simply a fence or barrier made of rails. And I would interpret what is designed as a railing and not a fence.
We don't have definition for fence or railing in our
Of course not.
definition.
Of course not. Why would we do that?
Up for interpretation.
Yes, of course it is.
I'm gonna, even though I wish that it weren't there,
Yeah.
because it really is odd to have a railing on top of a wall. And I'm sure you probably wish it didn't have to be there too.
I do.
I tend to lean towards it being a railing versus a fence, because a fence to me is like an enclosure in a yard.
Yeah.
Whereas this is really intended to, again, more like a porch or something where it's like So I'm gonna lean on that side.
Annie, the guideline about the fencing on the top of the wall is for front yards?
It says it's prohibited in front yards.
See, I don't really think this is in the front.
It's, I mean, technically,
A
it
little
is.
bit of a teeny bit of a section is,
Yes, because of
Yeah.
where it begins.
Yeah.
And I think that the site can, if we refer to the, if no one else has an issue with it, the site conditions, the design, the the tight, the tight configuration, and the fact that it's not actually enclosing a yard, that I think we can say that it is perhaps not incongruous with the special character of Montford.
There is an example of this on Tacoma Circle. There's a retaining wall with this exact thing. It is not, though, they've used the, it's not wire, what's the? I don't know what I'm talking about.
Oh,
Yes, so it sort of fades away. It's not as
Okay.
obvious.
I mean, it's sort of litigation prevention. I mean, that's the way I look at it. Aesthetically, it's not very pleasing, but you have to sometimes do things that,
and you've proposed in here that it's a wood rail
just to match.
match what's on the front.
Exactly.
Match everywhere else.
And
All right.
that's really the intent. Now, to your point though, can I just make, I mean, the building envelope is small, the lot is just over 4,000 square feet. And then when you take in the big drop off in the property, it's 1,100 square foot footprint.
Yeah.
Not large.
Right.
Having said that, because of the nature that it does drop off precipitously, you get this sort of big bonus area underneath.
Yeah.
So 955 square feet is below grade, sort of. And the upstairs is only 700, so I just build what I sort of envisioned, and Aaron did a good job, and he's master at this. Just sort of trying to stay appropriate, not overwhelm the surrounding structures too, but still give people the typical 3-2 with what they want, 3, 2.5. It seems like that's what most people
Yeah.
want.
Well, and there's not much in the guidelines that make us talk about that much, but I am going to pause and.
Commissioner Allen-Bogan,
Yeah.
you have a comment?
Well, I think what's confusing me here is that there's the topo lines over the driveway don't actually reflect the driveway grade
No.
as
they don't.
designed, and so
Right.
it's really difficult to see what the intent is on the site plan for the final grade of that drive in relationship to how it is to the rest of the property as well as the adjacent property. And then that would relate back to whether that, and I'm going to agree with everybody here, it's a guardrail. It's for fall prevention. So it would relate to the extent of how far that would extend past the front plane of the house. Potentially could move it back, which I think would please everybody here. The other design suggestion that I would make is on the front elevation of the house, that is, you see this little snippet of that picket. Potentially, and I don't know if the zoning regulations, because it seems like they've changed since my last reading of the document, would allow, but if you could have stairs that went down to the backyard from there, and then that railing wouldn't go across, and you wouldn't see it from the front of the house. And that railing then would go down the stairs and would tie in a little bit more to the building, the landscape, the
Well, and
architecture.
then
a little
maybe
bit.
the deck that's off the back,
And
because
then,
that's
and
the
then you
lift.
wouldn't need that, it might justify not putting that railing on the back of that deck because you have access to that. So it's just a suggestion, but I think there's some benefits that come out of that per the discussion that we're having. Thank you.
I went back and forth with Aaron on this too, because true, there's multiple egresses to the property. However, if you go out the back door, you get on the deck, you kind of wander around the backyard. And building a stair, doing a block foundation and putting a staircase that walks down, probably would be advantageous to get, if you end up coming out of that and coming back up. I don't know how it affects the structural integrity when you're holding dirt back, and that's the only caveat that I would say.
I think it would actually help you because you're creating a buttress.
That's true, right,
So
so-
you'd be holding less dirt back by doing that.
So you keep the existing structure then, and then hang the stairs off the back of it, so the structure doesn't change. Fair enough. I wouldn't build it in with concrete. You would just keep the structure and then hang a wooden structure off the back. That would be very doable. You'd only see the returns on each side, because the staircase, say, is 4 feet. That distance is 9, no, not quite that much. It's hard to tell. I can't, my vision's so bad. It's probably 6 feet. So you might see like a foot return on each side of the staircase, of whatever we're calling it, railing.
Yep. I'm going to pause for 1 second. I'm going to open the floor for public comment. We have some on this one. If you'll state your name for me, please.
Hi, my name is Benjamin Mitchell. I've not been sworn in.
Oh, right, let's do that really quick. All right, raise your right hand.
Yes.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the information you present during the hearing for a certificate of appropriateness or preliminary subdivision approval before the Historic Resources Commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Do you?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair and other members of the commission, Mr. Zollin as well. As a member of the development community myself, I'm very familiar with the fact that infill development and smaller lots present a variety of peculiar challenges, especially at this point in time. As a former member of the commission myself, I recall having these sorts of discussions some time ago, and I'm not aware of any substantive changes to the guidelines or standards, what have you, in the interim, but I do recall our having some fairly substantial discussions about floor area ratios and how that might be something that comes into play as we begin to look at lots of, I believe, 0.09 acres or something of that nature. And I believe it was stated that this particular dwelling would be 2,854 feet over 3,920.4 feet, according to my math, which was a 0.73 floor area ratio. And not to cast any shade on this particular application, just something to point out as we look at what I understood to be a potential encroachment of a non-structural component in the rear, and then the other various discussions that we've had, including the street view. And I have no particular comments on this application, but I do think that is something that you may all want to consider now and going forward as these more difficult infill projects come into light, and when we discuss the whole notion of precedent and materials being discussed as well that may have not been before this commission in its memory. And I believe Mr. Klein brought that up as far back as 2019 or so, with respect to the Elizabeth Place development. So that's all I had to say on it, and I wish this application luck.
Thanks. Okay. Further discussion, commissioners? Close the floor for public comment, sorry.
I do have a question. Is there a maximum ratio of floor area to site square footage?
No. There was some advocating for that, some
It's not
years
been
back,
codified.
but it's not been incorporated into the guidelines, no. I think the way, we can continue to hear from commissioners. I think I'm talking over you because you wanted to say something, so you go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to mention, this is a minor point given all the discussion we've had, but in the Montford Design Review Guidelines, on page 37, there is a very simple diagram showing what would be considered front yard and side yard. And in my interpretation, looking at that plan, because it looks like, is it just the red line that is the fence?
Yes.
Okay, and it looks like it ends kind of parallel to the front plane of the building.
Yes.
Yeah, according to this diagram, which granted is very simplified, it's just a rectangle, I think that could still be considered a side, on the side yard and not on the front yard.
Yeah, I think I agree with that.
I think that it's like a balloon, so we're trying to minimize, since this is a downward sloping lot. And if we, initially, the driveway was on the left, and the problem was the retaining wall was bigger, and the slope was greater than 20%. Doesn't seem like a big deal until it's icy and you slide off and you end up with your car on the other side. So this section in the beginning, which includes the apron, was to lose that as much as possible on that section. So if you do slide, you end up in a flatter section, which is the parking area. So all those things are contemplated. Now, the fence is just, again, litigation protection, or the railing. But those are the contemplations. As you went closer to that side, you lose some of the natural relief of the land itself.
I think it's worth noting that there does appear to be a discrepancy between the elevation and perspectives and the plan itself. If the fence is what is shown, or if the railing is what is shown in red on the plan on the screen right now, which is what I saw in the initial submittal as well, because this is the updated submittal. What's in the initial submittal in our packets shows that railing pulling a little bit forward from that front elevation plane, and that appears to be the condition in both the north elevation drawing and in the perspective drawing. So I just want to be clear that the plan and drawings are a little different. So you'll want to clear that up with your architect.
Yeah, I'm not sure to paraphrase that to him, but maybe.
I can describe it to him. It looks like it's probably
Okay. Because
4 to 6 feet extending beyond the plane of the front building corner in the elevation drawing versus the sizing it.
And I mean, it sounds as though we have perhaps rectified the issue of definition and condition, but it's worth just making sure that knowing exactly what it is that's going to be built.
There was a full topographical survey. I would never even contemplate doing this without it because of the complexity of the land and structure. One. Number two, there's no huge time constraint for me in terms of being like, oh, I have this sense of urgency. So if it takes beyond 1 meeting, 2 meetings, whatever that is, I'm not.
I mean, I think where I think there's maybe still some, I guess I'm wondering what the right next step is for the application in terms of whether we've got a level of comfort that we could make a motion today, or if there's still outstanding items that we want to see. I think the sample of the stucco makes it a little hard to approve an application today because it's not something we've had a chance to kind of look at and to see. There's a little bit of work on your part to figure out the landscaping and to make some different recommendations to that, and it maybe affords you a little bit of an opportunity to make sure you let the guardrail and the retaining wall there, and if you want to consider the stair to the back deck or whatever, would give you an opportunity to do that if there was a continuance to the next meeting.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate. I think it's appropriate. And, the big material change would be shifting the building. And if that's something because the only reason is it changes a bit of the foundational issues.
For sure. And it may be that there's not enough maneuverability there to make it of added value either, and the trade-offs may be significant in the foundations and the way the grade works. But I'd love it. It gives you a chance to study it at the very least, because I do think that, the stucco is maybe the thing driving the need for a continuance, because it'd be hard for us to sort of defer that to staff level approval, because I think it feels like something we kind of want to look at.
And if you have a recommendation for what to do with this guardrail and what you think works and the feasibility of it, I'd like to, between that period of time, I'd like to explore the feasibility of what
what to make it out of, you mean? Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, well, what's the feasibility? Do we need to slide the building down? And then it's sort of a two-part question. If you slide the building down, what do you benefit? What's the benefit? And then obviously it becomes an aesthetic issue because something's got to go there.
But I think we came around on the placement of the guardrail with the retaining wall
Okay.
because of what the guidelines say and how we've
So on
interpreted
top is
things.
appropriate.
So I think I think we're in pretty good agreement on
But in terms of
I see a
materials,
lot of head
if
shaking.
anybody wants to opine about the materials,
I mean, wood picket railing is pretty customary.
And I think it's just maybe to me at least, the sample and then also making sure that the plans are act like.
Mine, yeah.
Because they're not like,
Yeah.
let me guys, can I ask a general question? Does anybody have a sort of oral issue with the look and feel of the building? I mean, I think Aaron Wilson does a nice job, and again, just to his comments, I think, again, you get a lot of bonus area, but when you look at the actual footprint, it's not quite as large as you think. That's the thing, it's 1,100 square feet, and I did squeeze this 2 feet, and then I squeezed the porch, which was 10 by 10, down to 8 by 8, because of the eave overhang, it kind of impinged on the window, and I think it really changed the look of it. So I tried to squeeze the porch even in the front to minimize the footprint. And it's a 1.5, of course, not a full 2-story, which I think would overwhelm that lot if you did a full 2-story. If you looked at I think it was 29 feet from bottom to top, which is definitely way below what you could do pursuant to the code.
Yeah, I've not heard any strong concerns about the look of the building,
And
especially with the changes that you've proposed today.
I was going to say that the use of the three grouped windows on the first and second stories, I was, like staff, concerned about the original configuration of the windows, and that change, I think the building does a very good job of recalling the historic features of Montford and that particular area of Montford, while appearing to be new construction. It is respectful and compatible with the existing historic character of the district. Nicely done.
Well, that's my overarching, that's the overarching hope. Squeezing, getting it, squeeze the building, I like to cut out as much space as I could, frankly, without having a bedroom that's 10 by 10, it's a real dance. And I really believe that the mudroom is such a, people just love that, and it has a laundry room and mudroom. It's having a second egress from a safety perspective is really good, and also from utility.
All right, so I think next steps would be for you to request a continuance.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And so we just need to hear you do that.
Okay. I would like to request a continuance.
Excellent.
Speak to a date specific.
Yes.
Would it continue to the April?
Yes, please.
Okay. And so then we need a motion, right?
Now, I can confer with you, Alex, on kind of next steps and codify kind of the discussion, so I have concrete things I can work against. I have a few I've got in my notes, so thank you for the time. It's a pleasure meeting everybody, and I do appreciate all your time. I know it's voluntary.
Yep. Do we have a motion? I guess we need a motion, right, to continue?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Move to continue the application to the April meeting.
A second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Excellent. All right, well, we'll see you in April.
Yes, thank you so
Yes,
much.
thank you.
Pleasure.
Okay. All right.
I don't have an agenda in front of me, but I think we just have one.
Nominating committee and the HRC award.
Right, HRC.
Yeah.
So,
Let's go
do you remember the list for the nominating committee?
No. I might be able to if I can get on my email really quick. Because you did email it to me and we agreed and I was happy, but I forget what it is and I was unprepared today.
While she's looking for that, I'll just go over the HRC award really quickly. So I think I've mentioned this whenever I've done new commissioner orientation sessions with all of you, but the commission gives an award every year. I believe the way it's worded is by word or by deed has kindled among the citizenry of Asheville and Buncombe County, yada, 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 has contributed to preservation efforts. Just a little bit of context of the name of the award. It was, in its inception, called the Sonley Award after Forester Sonley, who was widely known for much of our history to be the grandfather of the history of Buncombe County. And his library was the basis for became the beginning point of the Buncombe County Library collection. But it was deeded to the county with the stipulation that it only be available to white people. So this was brought to our attention, the kind of legacy of Forester Sonley 2021, when the award was given to Andrea Clark. She was some hesitancy about accepting an award called the Sonley Award. So we did some educating. We asked our special collections manager to come and talk to the commission about his legacy. And so the commission elected to rename the award, and it was changed to the Historic Resources Champion Award, and was re-given to Ms. Clark, and then the current awardees for 2022, and it's 2022. I've lost track of time with the pandemic, so I think most of us have. And so anyways, the time is approaching for you all to put forth nominations for that award, so just be thinking on that. Feel free to send me any nominations that you have between now and the next meeting. And just like a little summary of why you think the person is a good candidate for the award. And then I'll bring all that information to the commission at the next meeting, either the next meeting or the May meeting. You all need to take a vote so that we can have the award ready to go. So it can be presented at the Preservation Society is always gracious enough to accommodate our award being given, since we don't really have capacity to host an event per se. We just need to have everything ready to go in time for the Griffin Awards, which is usually the last week of May. So just be thinking on that.
Is there a list of prior?
I'll send it out to all of you. It's got
In the last couple years, Andrea Clark was 2020. The two gentlemen that have been stewards of the South Asheville Cemetery were recipients in 2021. Last year was Ann Chesky Smith and the Skyland Golf folks. Huh? The caddies, yes. Those have been the last several years recipients. Forget the ones before that. It's kind of.
It's been alive. It's been around since the 80s. So.
Yeah.
We also we used to have a silver cup that we would have people's names engraved on. But when we changed the name, we decided to give a plaque or a frame certificate instead, so that because the goal always comes back to us. And if there's the new person, then got to be where it was hard to add more signatures and those things. So it's nicer maybe to have something that they for the person.
And they can keep it, yeah. So, okay.
Okay. Any other questions on nominating committee, or did you find your email?
I did find it. And so we would like to appoint Shannon, Annie, and Maria as the members of the nominating committee for the new slate of officers.
Thank you guys for volunteering, and Emily and I can circle back with you between now and the next meeting to talk about next steps in the process. Does that sound good? Okay.
Okay?
Can I speak of HRC for a moment?
Sure. I guess.
Yeah, my name is Benjamin Mitchell, and I've been sworn in. Good to see you all. I wasn't intending to speak tonight on these
And the one
matters.
thing you came for was continued.
I love HRC. No, so as I sat here and thought about this tonight, I decided to stick around for this particular purpose, and I thought it would be worthwhile to mention an individual whom some of you would be familiar with named Jack Thompson. Jack Thompson was the longtime executive director of the Preservation Society, and I pulled up his LinkedIn, publicly available while we were here tonight. So for the past 19 years, Jack has been working in the preservation field. According to his LinkedIn, superintendent, site manager for a general contractor, another general contractor after that. From 2004 until 2010, Historic Salisbury Foundation. Then the first time I ever saw him was circa 2010 in this very room when he became the executive director of the Preservation Society of Asheville and Loncombe County, in which role he served 9 years and 4 months. A period of tremendous growth for that body and tumultuous times as we all remember, 08, 09, and 10 in this area. And he was responsible for raising quite a bit of awareness and funds alike for preservation, and was a frequent flyer in meetings which I attended here. Toward the end of that tenure, Mr. Thompson was in very poor health, even though he is relatively young. I think he's in his mid-50s. And so as that ran to a conclusion, he then went down to Charlotte and served 3 years as the executive director of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Historical Landmarks Commission. And I understand that part of that move was for better medical care 4 years ago now, so it's quite some time has passed. And then I learned just this evening that he is now the Western Regional Director for Preservation North Carolina, beginning in January of this year, in which he is Regional Director for 35 counties of Western North Carolina, working with historic property owners to celebrate their historic architecture and to permanently protect these tangible connections to our past. So I do hope that you all would consider Jack Thompson. I don't think that he was born and bred here in Asheville, but he came here as a young man and had a breadth and depth of experience, as I've already discussed tonight. So just wanted to call your attention to that person and his efforts.
Thank you.
Have a nice night.
Thanks, Ben. Other discussion? Adjournment? Motion?
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
Peace out.
Yeah, I thought where he would have been taking that position. I know, I forgot his.